I was doing that for a long time, but I'd say, at the 10-year mark, right as I was kind of getting some success, I kind of realized I didn't like it so much as a business. And I had started making clothing for my daughter, who was just born in 1996, and that kind of graduated to, after I figured out how to make baby clothing, I realized that I wanted clothes that weren't out there in the market, so I started making clothing for myself, and all this was just kind of done in a back room in my house. I actually had no intention at all of starting a very large clothing company, but that's what it kind of turned into. So, I kind of was selling clothing to my friends and, people like that. Actually, a lot of performers in Los Angeles as well, burlesque performers, swing dancers, actors and actresses, people who just needed something that wasn't being made at the time. And I kind of learned how to make everything. And in 1999, I launched the website, pinupgirlclothing.com, and just slowly grew it over time, and here we are. So, yeah, I started very small and very, very slowly. And so here we are 20 years later.
I started doing this as a hobby, like cosplay and just making costumes. I used to go to conventions just as an attendee, collecting my favorite comic books, getting them signed by my favorite artists and writers. And, when I saw cosplay for the first time, I thought it was a really great thing. I thought it was awesome, and who doesn't want to dress up as their, childhood heroes and things like that. So about 6 years ago, is when I decided to cosplay for the first time. Made my Star Trek red shirt based off of the character Brandy from Liberty Meadows, which is a comic strip. And from there, just kind of snowballed. Started making the next costume and the next one. Started getting invited to conventions, doing panels on cosplay, costuming construction, once I started to get a little further along, and then started judging costume contests. And now it's transitioned into that's what I do full time. In all of that, I also started to do modeling for different friends' lines, Castle Corsetry, Elhoffer Designs, Pinup Girl Clothing, and it's been great. I will say that years before I started cosplaying, I actually bought my very first Heidi dress. And love that dress. So I love the aesthetic, I love the look of it. And then, who knew 5, 6 years later I was actually for this very same company. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of learning and growing, but it's literally a hobby that's turned into what what pays the bills.
So, my microphone is off. So I started Elhoffer Design technically I guess 8, 9 years ago when I moved out to LA, because I was moving out here to be a costume designer in film and TV. And so rather than, I had my full name as my website, but I also added Elhoffer Design in case I ever could turn it into something. I had no intention to do fashion. I hate the fashion world. I think that fashion shows are really obnoxious and it's just not my thing. I was a costume designer. So I wanted things that were practical, that could be worn by people. So I started at Elhoffer Design just as my costume design business. Then I started working with Nerdist Industries a lot. They passed me on to Ashley Eckstein and Brittany and Brianna as a freelance designer for her. Then Leela Fine hired me as a full-time in-house designer. And then when they fired me 2.5 years ago, right before Christmas, I was devastated and I needed money to pay for my house that I had just bought and my life and presents and everything. So I started making handmade orders for friends and I posted it online. And I did a Phasma dress that went viral, and I had 30 orders on this one dress, which was crazy to me, because it was not cheap, and which is, when I was at Wheel of Fine, the thing that my bosses kept saying, no one wants to pay that much for a dress, not a geek girl. I was like, no, they do. If it's really good, they do. So I started doing handmade orders for the first 6, 7 months, and then I had a few dresses that just were really popular, and I kept making them over and over and over again, and I was getting a little bit tired. So I went to a local factory in Los Angeles, and I asked them, I took the dress, I was like, would you do this? And they're like, yeah, there's nothing crazy about this. This is totally replicable. And I was like, cool, then do it for me. So, shoot through the fabric, I threw them the pattern, and they took care of that. And then from there, I just kept going with other dresses, and then a friend of mine that does knitwear was like, hey, would you want to do some sweaters? And I was like, yeah, let's team up and do this. And we did, and now I have a business that I live off of, and it's fantastic. I'm not a pinup girl yet. Hopefully in 20 years I can do that.
I hope you're a pinup girl in less than 20 years.
Well, yeah.
That was like a really slow trajectory.
It's slow. Like, I'm a business of one still. I still do everything. I do all the marketing, I do all the photos, I don't do the modeling, I can't do that, but I get friends to model for me.
And you do an amazing job.
Thank you. It is tiresome.
Kitty, you're my hero. So I come from the music industry and marketing background, and I moved up to California for a job that I was told I was gonna have. I did not get that. So when I moved up here, I was doing some video content for a bar, and I started an Etsy store literally to pay my bills because California is really expensive. And it kind of just really naturally grew and grew and grew, and the first thing that I made, like I started making like wrap bracelets, and I was like braiding fabric and putting little charms on them, and they were cute, you know, they were cute. And it kind of, I was like, hey, you know what would be really cool? And I mean, this is like 2010. I was like, it'd be really cool if there was just a beanie that looked like Peter Pan's hat without being Peter Pan's hat. This was like before Disney bounding was a thing, if you're familiar with the Disney bound culture and that whole community. And I made like 80 of those, which at the time was like insane to me. And then they sold out like an hour, and I was like, oh dang, okay. Because basically, you know, I was grown up, and at the time Disney was making things that just had like aerial space everywhere with glitter and rhinestones, and I was like, I'm not 4. So I was like, I really wish that something like this existed. Like, I've always been a huge Disney fan, and it was like, I don't want something that screams Ariel. I don't want something that feels like I only can wear it in a Disney park. And I just kind of started making things that I wish existed in the marketplace and that didn't, and then soon found out that there were a lot of other people that felt the exact same way. Like, if you're a super Disney fan, you know that we're cut from the same cloth. And what kind of like we specialize in is doing these like deep cuts. It's almost kind of like a secret handshake. Like, we pull these kind of like niche, smaller things that aren't screaming Disney, but like if you get it, you're like, hey. And yeah, so it was very grassroots marketing. I'm friends with like Andrew and Holly Ducote, if you guys know his name. They were Peter Pan and Mindy in the park, and now like we're best friends, and it's great. And they really were like, this is so good. And people like were fans of them, and they kind of helped push the brand as well when it was like first starting. But yeah, just kind of naturally grew from an Etsy store to being my full-time job for the past 5 years, and we're continuing to grow. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Disney fans for this.
Turn it on. Yep.
Oh, that was totally not my phone. I know. It was the microphone that I thought that might connect to this. Anyways, back to the panel and not about technological issues that were not my fault. I particularly loved what Tiffany said about creating what you would have wanted to see and what you wanted to buy yourself. Because I know for my twin sister and I think for Laura as well, that when it comes to creation and when it comes to kind of following and taking that first big leap into the unknown, I think the first vision is realizing and trusting yourself and thinking, you know what, maybe other people will like what I would like, and find that. And I think that's the beauty of Comic-Con and Wondercon in this particular culture, is having all these little niches come together and create a kind of happy family. And I realized that I forgot to answer my own question. So I'm speaking on behalf of my identical twin and I, so just imagine me, but there's another one. My sister and I started when we were 12 years old, and we were really big comic fans and book fans, but we're dyslexic and hated to read more than anything. And our father was the one that convinced us that we should put all these stories that we had always loved, and we should put those stories down on paper. And so 9 months later, we had our first novel called The Strand of Prophecy. And long story short, we ended up sending it in for awards, and it ended up winning 8. Fast forward 10 years, my sister and I have been professionally writing and working what we used to just attend for the sheer joy of it, which is places like this. So we've worked over 100 Comic Cons now, and this will be our, I'm not sure which Wondercon. With this, is it fourth, fifth? Is anyone? How long has it been in? Thank you, Butch. So that's. We also have. These are some of our books we just released. So I always like to bring them and show them. Like, look, we write books. And that is kind of our story that we kind of continued and are very lucky to be able to live our childhood dream every day. I guess the next question would be, if you could go back to yourself at the beginning of your journey, what would be a piece of advice you would tell yourself? And could we start with Tiffany this time and then go to the right?
Oh,
it's a toughie.
advice I would give to myself?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm gonna sound like a total, like, jackass. But I've always been a very confident person. I feel like very fortunate to always like my dad raised me as like I've always been like a strong female. I've always thought that I could do it, and I don't like regret anything that I've ever done. I feel like I'm like super stubborn, and I always do what I want. And if I wasn't already like that, I would like tell myself to be like that. But yeah, my advice would just be like, hey girl, keep doing what you're doing, because you'll be your own boss one day and it's gonna be dope. Yeah.
That's really hard. Gosh, because yeah, I'm in a similar boat. If I hadn't moved out here, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. That alone, like graduating from college and 2 weeks later driving out to California with no job lined up, is terrifying. And it was right after the writer's strike, right after the economy crashed in 2008, 2009, and so like, there was nothing. There was no hope except I was like, well, I'm good at what I do, so I'm gonna go sew. Like I don't know. I'm like, I guess for like early on in my business stuff, I'm like, expand your factory sooner, because that one factory you're working with is gonna not work out real well for you. So like, don't ever put all your eggs in one basket. Don't ever rely upon one person or one thing. Diversify, not like as quickly as possible, but diversify what you're offering or what you're doing. That's advice.
Love you. For myself, like, yeah, it's kind of difficult. I appreciate the mistakes that I've made in life because they've made me a stronger person. So I don't regret any choices that I've made that lead me to where I am today. But I guess like along the lines of what Katie said, I'd probably diversify my content sooner than I did. I had those moments of doubt where I wasn't sure that doing one thing or another would work out, and I'm very much that person that just dives right into a project. It's like, we'll see. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And we'll just do the thing. And it's, for me, everything's naturally always worked. When I take a chance on something, it's always worked in my favor when it comes to things that are creative based. Before cosplay, before modeling, anything like that, I used to be a cake decorator. And before that, I was working in the mortgage industry. And I quit the mortgage industry to pursue baking, and that worked out great. And then I stopped baking because cosplay thing worked out great. So it's always been, I'm very much a risk taker. So, yeah, I mean, I say I just would diversify myself a little more so in the beginning than where I'm doing it now in the last 6 months. Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry.
Well, I've been in business for 20 years, so I have lots of things that I would say to my younger self. But it's interesting, when I went from photography to clothing, what I used to tell people was, that I was happy that I stopped doing photography as a business, because I felt that it was too close to me, and, if someone didn't like my photography, I took it very personal, and when I started making clothing, I didn't take it personally at all. I said, well, if someone wants to buy it or they don't buy it, it's great. And when I started, I did not really have that close association with my own ego, with the clothes and everything else. So it was much easier for me to kind of, in fact, I learned to deal with rejection because when you start a website, you get to see all the people who visit your site every day, and you realize a lot of people are there looking at the product, but they're not buying it. Only a few people, and you realize you might, when I first started, I thought, oh, I get 20 orders a day, but I got rejected 10,000 times. There were literally 10,000 people on my site that day with 20 placed orders. And it really helped me keep in perspective, like if I had a physical store and that many people came in and said no, I might be really, but it kind of helped me keep things in perspective. But basically over time, and I think, when, the website, and the business exploded and we do have our customers, we're very involved with our customers involved with us, so we get to hear in real time how they feel when they wear our clothing and everything. So I started to become much more attached and having my ego attached to the company, which is good in one way because it means that you always make sure that, at least for me personally, everything that I produce, whether or not it has my name on it, it has my name on it. And so I have a lot of pride in my product, and I feel personally responsible for people's product that they're wearing. And if it's no good, that's a reflection on me. So in one way that was good, but in the way that it was bad was, we've been around for 20 years, and we hit a point where we were less of a mom and pop company, and we're about to become more corporate. And that actually means that everything in your company just starts to change. You have to do everything differently. And because I ended up kind of feeling so attached to the company, when people would talk about growing it and selling it, I was like, oh, I'd never do that because it would change everything. And I closed a lot of doors that now I'm realizing was probably a bad idea. Because at some point, I think anyone who founds and runs a company, for instance, I always say that my New Year's resolution last year was to fire myself, was to replace myself as CEO of my company. All I want to do now is make the clothing and deal with my customers and do the things that I think I'm a total expert at and very good at and can be very effective. And I was very attached to this idea that I was the CEO of the company and that I was a business person. But I started to realize my dream was never to be a business person. I love creating. I'm an artist. I love to make dresses, and I love everything. I've got my lounge, I've got my customers, and I love dealing with them and communicating with them. And so what I would do differently would be when you start to realize that this company is becoming more than what you can handle, and you have to start bringing people in. You have to not let the company be about you, or even your own business. You have to start to understand when it's time for you to let experts in and let go of control. Like the first letting go of control is when you have to hire your first employees and delegate, and they're doing stuff you used to do, and that can be really hard. But there's a second letting go that I'm just starting to do now, and I probably should have done it 2-3 years ago, like prepared for the growth that instead of growing and going, oh God, I'm underqualified for the growth that my company has right now. And that's something I had to admit to myself and say, okay, I'm going to get some people in here who've done this their whole lives, and they understand it. I actually don't even understand commercial apparel production because I learned at home on the sewing machine, and when I started going to the factories, I just started realizing all the things I didn't know. Which I'm sure Katie,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're like, wow.
Oh, my first dresses, I always wear with knits, knitwear, and I use woolly nylon thread, which is an elastic thread. And I use that because I pulled apart a black milk piece, and I was like, oh, this is a different type of thread than everyone else uses. What is this? And I figured out what it was. And my first factory I worked with, they tried to use regular thread in like a spandex, it's a swimwear spandex.
It won't stretch.
Well, and their logic was, because they're men and they know more than me,
Oh,
is wonderful, was they had the dress hanging and they were like, well, it's down the side seam, it doesn't need to stretch. And I go, oh, okay, just real quick. And I stretched as a girl would when she's putting it on over her boobs. Stretched downward and pulled it downward, all of it snapped. And I go, cool, so you're gonna cover all those repairs? And I was like, can we use the woolly nylon thread that I told you to use in the first place because it's priced?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. So I learned very quickly, like I have to at least have reasons for why I'm doing the different things I'm doing. Woolly nylon being elastic, it doesn't sew as easily. You have to machine the do adjusting. And I'm like, okay, I'm paying you to do it, so don't understand.
That's just the, I mean, you know, the beauty of trying to do Los Angeles in terms of clothing production. It's a t-shirt town, so they're just used to done. You know, your clothes, my clothes,
They're elaborate.
and they will fight you
On everything. They would, why are your pockets so big? I'm like, why do you care?
so I can fit my food.
Yeah. I don't want to keep, I'm like, I'm the one paying for fabric. What do you care? Like, oh, it's 16 extra stitches, charge me. Like, yeah, so it's like you learn as you
I'm wearing the Audrey right now.
That's why everyone needs to own everything that Katie makes. And they have these bars.
So I think the moral of this panel is that pockets are important and that Ivy should be baking cake for us. All right. Actually, no. I just really want cake. Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on? Are you guys good? Okay. So I have a rather when it comes to the question that I asked, I have a rather intense answer for it. So my sister and I, we started when we were 12 years old. We just turned 23. And with that, I thought, you know, there was that vision in my mind of what I wanted. And I went out, and we eventually did achieve that. But the picture in your mind is never going to be quite like reality. And that's okay. Because you can control the world on a page, right? In a book, when you write a book, you're the god of that little world. You have complete control of that. You're the author of your story, but in life, you are simply a character. So instead of focusing on the end, which is what I often did, I would constantly think of, well, my life will start when. That was my life mantra. I will have a social life when. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Have friends. And that it's about the journey rather than the destination, because I found myself waking up a few years ago realizing that I had achieved my childhood dream. I did. It took me years. It was very difficult, but I realized it wasn't the actual crossing that finish line what was important. It was the journey and the people you meet along the way that influence you and change you for the better, and they give you more stories to write about. So
There's no end point. The end point's when you die.
yeah, and then someone else will write your story, hopefully, if you live it well. Anyways, next question that's maybe not as morbid as my last answer. What would be your creative influences for your work, and how have they changed over the years? This time, let's start with Laura.
In terms of, you know, in terms of why I create, there's no influence. I just need to do it. That's, you know, I'm an Aspie, so I'm very visually oriented, and the way I make sense of the world myself is actually through pictures. When I remember events, I actually remember a series of pictures, you know, not even moving, like, so I've always just had, you know, from the time I was young, and, you know, I started out drawing stick figures with dresses on them, whatever, so, but in terms of Pinup Girl and the aesthetic, you know, I always just tell people I've been dressing my mom. You know, which, if you ask most designers, Christian Dior was dressing his mom, Charles James, you know, and it happens a lot. You know, my mom was born in 1936, so in the late 50s, she was, you know, late teens, early 20s, and, you know, I wish I had a photo to show of her, but I mean, you know, she was impeccable. You know, I get my OCD from her and everything else, and my perfectionism. So you know, I grew up, and also my mom, very beautiful. And from the time she was a kid, you know, and I had male relatives, you know, her cousins or brothers that were amateur photographers. It was a big, you know, craze in the 40s, because everyone could buy little box cameras and stuff. And so, you know, there was a big treasure trove of photos of her. I grew up looking through these photos. And so my aesthetic really got kind of stuck in the 50s. And also I do believe that you know, mid-century style is an extremely flattering way for most people to dress. But you know, it's definitely something I focus on. Also, when I was, you know, younger, and I was a tomboy growing up, and you know, the only way I felt like a woman if I was walking, and again, this is just me, but you know, if I wore boxy clothing, people would always mistake me for a dude and call me sir, and you know, not that that bothered me too much, but if I wanted to be seen as a woman, I would wear like a 50s dress, and all of a sudden said, oh, she has a figure or whatever. So that's my main, you know, creative influence in terms of the aesthetic. But I'm just, I've always been, you know, interested in very good design and clean lines and graphics, and so it's basically, you know, short answer, mom.
A lot like Laura, I need to create. I have to make something with my hands. It's something that for me is fulfilling, and if I don't do that in anything that I'm not doing in my life, then it feels like there's a void. So, you know, with the cake decorating to this, it's just something that has been a natural phase in everything that I do. And in terms of, you know, people I looked up to or draw inspiration from, I go with Lauren from Castle Corsetry. Her costuming is impeccable. It's beautiful. And I've worked with her before. We actually just did a thing for Screen Junkies, which was great. That's for me, it was like a very proud thing because she actually reached out to me to say, hey, I need you do armor. I need you to make this armor for the Screen Junkies thing for the Pacific Rim. Yeah, I did the armor for one of the little kaiju doggies, or one of the Jaegers, yeah. And like that was really great, you know, like my friend, I love her work, I look up to her work, reached out to me to do something and work with her on something, which I thought was awesome. But then also there's this guy called Heroes Designs back east. His work is insane. The beadwork, like just, look him up.
Very elaborate.
Yes, the amount of detail that goes into everything that he creates is something that I absolutely want to strive for in quality and precision.
For me, I remember one of the first movies that I was influenced by, and like, don't hate me, that I was in 6th grade, was episode 1, Heroes of Venice. And seeing Trisha Goodell's costume, it's really her work was the standout of the whole series, the whole prequel series, trilogy. And I loved it, so I bought the costume book, I read up on what the costumers even do, I watched Star Wars nonstop, and then I also got into Lord of the Rings, and the Lord of the Rings costumes are also world building and just phenomenal. So that was what I started in high school, going into the local Renaissance fair, which got me sewing, and got me making my own stuff. And then as I got older, like I've always been a geek, and I started making clothes based around the costumes that I knew how to sew. I know how to make that costume. How can I strip it down, take its lines and its color and its silhouette, maybe its texture, and turn it into everyday wear that I can wear. When I was on film sets, this may shock some of the ladies in the audience, but men don't take you seriously.
What? What do you mean?
I know, I bring this up a lot because it's like a stickler for me. So I was always the costumer, and I'm young. I did my first feature film when I was 22, 23. I had to put my ID out to one of the actresses because she didn't believe me. She's like, you have to be 30. She's like, you don't look it. And I was like, I don't care. I could look it. I don't care. She's like, you don't seem like you're 23. And I was like, no, I am. Here's my ID. Like, and so I had to constantly prove myself to everyone. So I loved Game of Thrones when it came out, so I started making clothes inspired by Khaleesi, because she's a very strong woman that does not take anything from anyone that she doesn't also want. So I made a few tunics, and I remember walking into Warner Brothers costume to do a rental pull, and as I was checking out, the girl was like, I don't know if you know what my reference is, but you remind me right now of Khaleesi from Game of Thrones. And I was like, that's exactly what I was going for. Do you respect me? So she was like, yeah, I'm not gonna mess with you. I was like, cool, thanks, can you give me a discount? For me, it's always been channeling these characters, and so for me, the influence has been the costumers, because I'm pulling from what their work is, and from Michelle Clapton, who designs Game of Thrones, she was a fashion designer first, and is now turning fashion into costumes, and I'm kind of reverse engineering that back to, like, this is my Melisandre-inspired dress. Like, it's very simple to people that are fans. Like, I could dress it up further and wear a choker, and I could do Melisandre, do a simple bound, I could make it more of a cosplay. But for me, it's making it something that I can wear every day. And yeah, my mom is a huge influence. I don't run everything by her because I don't have that kind of time. But I definitely throw things her way, or she'll message me like, oh my gosh, that red dress that you posted about yesterday on your Facebook is so pretty. I want that. And I was like, okay, like, I'll send you one. I know your size because I make them myself. And so for me, like, I'm like, she doesn't know what Game of Thrones is. She's never gonna watch it. There's way too much violence and sex and gore for her. But like, she likes the look of it, which is great to me. Because I'm like, cool. If I can sell it to someone that isn't a fan, then the fans are only gonna love it more because we get it, and we're gonna dress it up the way that we want to show it off. And I saw one of my fans wore this for Mother Gothel from Tangled. I was like, that's brilliant. Something that's versatile. It's not just a Star Wars dress. It's not just a Game of Thrones dress. It works for so many fandoms because all of our fandoms use similar coloring and color schemes to tell these stories because the stories are so simple at the end of the day. So that's my inspiration.
Cool. Unlike all of these lovely ladies that do really fancy, handmade, tailored things, I will say what I do. Oh, we'll call it ready to wear. That sounds better than t-shirts and hats. So inspiration for me when we come up with new designs that are all graphic based is really kind of a backwards way of looking at it because I love fashion. And for me, it's like, you know, I want to, like, I want this look, right? Like, I want this vibe. Like, with magazines, Instagram, whatever, I'm like, I want this vibe. And it's like, okay, what type of graphic shirt or cut do I need to, like, make this happen?
Like your band tee.
Kind of like the band tees. Like, we've done some parody tees. They're like the Seven Dwarfs Ramones hybrid, like high heel stuff. Someone was wearing it, I saw it, like, there she is. But yeah, we kind of work backwards, and because we are, you know, like a smaller boutique, we kind of get the advantage when it comes to what like Disney can release themselves because we can turn stuff out faster. So I'm always looking at things, you know, like what H&M is doing and what, you know, like opening ceremony just launched like a boss Disney collection. That's really cool. But we can kind of look at these things and be like, okay, this is cool, this is kind of on trend, but because with Disney and like their licensing and their whole, you know, the red tape to do something on that.
The 12-month turnaround on anything.
Yeah, on their turnaround, they're always kind of a little bit behind. So because we're a lot smaller and we can turn things out quicker, we can kind of see what's on trend now and see what's kind of like going to be coming up and be able to, you know, like turn that around sooner than later, which is cool. Like all the 90s stuff that's like so big now, like Disney's just like just kind of getting to it. And it's like, we can, sure, like, so yeah, it's like inspiration comes from like a lot of different things, but mainly kind of a backwards way of thinking, like, or, you know, like, hey, I really want to do this shirt that has like this one, it's like, we haven't had a shirt like this, and it's got a knotted side to it, and it's like, oh, what kind of makes sense for this cut that like already exists, because we're not doing a lot of like custom tees and everything, because we try to keep every single design on a different cut. So a lot of the times our graphics are also just kind of driven by like, hey, you know what? Like we really need to do like a new crew neck. So like what kind of makes sense to go on a crew neck?
So you're not just slapping art onto bodies.
No. And we also, because, you know, we're like, we only do Disney inspired stuff, right? So we're definitely like also driven by like what's happening with Disney. Like is, you know, when, I'm trying to think of like another movie, like when live action Beauty and the Beast came out, we had a Lumia shirt to come out. Like we kind of go on this hype with, if it's an anniversary, a huge anniversary for a film coming out, that really kind of drives a lot of the inspiration and vibe for what products we release when.
Wonderful, thank you. Those are all really thought-provoking answers. I'm just going to check real quickly. Hello over there! It's the moderator speaking. How much time do we have, just so I know?
We just have about 17 more minutes.
17 more minutes. So what if I would do maybe 2 more questions and then a Q&A? You guys like the idea of a Q&A? You could ask your own questions, interact with everyone on the panel. Sound good? Thumbs up? Yep, cool. All right. I would have to. I keep almost forgetting to answer my own questions because I'm so fascinated with everyone up here. For my sister and I, originally, our inspiration was comic books and sci-fi movies because we grew up in places like this. With Star Trek, Star Wars, Golden Age comic books. As we've gotten older, I think that I've been inspired more by H.P. Lovecraft and a lot of different horror, but also we like to take inspiration from a lot of different unconventional places. Like we love taking inspiration for our books from historical fashion or vintage fashion. We're writing our first historical fantasy novel right now. So sometimes looking at the close of an era could be very insightful to how they lived in that period of time. So sometimes going and doing kind of a reverse engineering way of understanding the characters and how they lived in that period of time, or even taking those styles and putting it in the future. Okay, so since we are at a convention, and this is kind of celebrating storytelling and all of that comes in the celebration of that, I was wondering what story or what movie or book, TV show, whatever medium you like, really inspired you as to begin with and now. Let's start with, did I start with you last time? Did I start with Laura?
You started with me last.
Okay, let's start with Tiffany.
And
I'm going to guess.
Let's try to do like 3-minute answers so we can get through and do the questions. So.
Enchanted, forever and always. Did somebody just clap a little bit? Thank you. No, Giselle's amazing. Like, Giselle's story is like, for starters, she ends up with the clothing line, which is awesome. And she lives in this like really fairy tale world, and then she meets this man who's very not. I don't know if anybody knows my boyfriend Matt, but he is Patrick Dempsey in Enchanted. And I kind of bring him up, and he comes and brings me down a little bit, and we work really well together. And it's the best story. You guys, it's so good.
That's really hard. Like, I guess X-Men, like, I'm still always inspired by that, even if the movies aren't the best. I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get. I like how they're outsiders, and people always are fighting them, and they still want to do good.
Villains. It's always villains. Magneto, Dr. Doom, all the bad guys. I think they're very much misunderstood. I understand. I love villains. But on a serious note, X-Men, Beauty and the Beast, and anything that I'm going to screw up his name all the time, H.R. Giger. Aliens. Aliens.
There's a great book, it's kind of an autobiography, but a biography of Coco Chanel, called Coco Chanel in Her Own Words, which I love and I've read numerous times, I'm obsessed with. My position is Coco Chanel was the first punk rock designer. She didn't give a fuck. She made clothes out of timber fabric, she didn't give a shit. And of course, I know that, history is now treating this book and this movie a little bit differently than it did back when it came out. That Devil Wears Prada, sorry, changed my life. I read that book when it came out, I finished it, and I was probably the only person who finished it and said, I need an assistant.
To begin with, as I said before, comic books and sci-fi movies. But as I've gotten older, I've come to appreciate my childhood love of Alice in Wonderland a lot. Just everything about that book, and also I just released a poetry book. So a lot of different poets have inspired me, and particularly the crossover between fiction writers and poetry. Okay, so before kind of my other question, everyone was kind of going a little into and talking a little bit about their creative processes. So I would love to know more about your individual creative processes. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, mine's long and convoluted, and again, I tell my boyfriend, and he asks me if I'm not obsessive over people, but I'm obsessive over things. And so I end up I'll get an idea for something I want to make in my head, and I will sketch it in my book. And by the time it usually gets made, there's probably 8 or 10 sketches of the same thing over and over. So like my brain will just like sketch it until it actually happens. So a lot of times, anything that we make for Pinup Girl, it's been in a sketchbook for 3 or 4 years sometimes, because I have a ton of ideas and I end up writing them all down and sketching them. But then there's always way too many that we can do in a year or however much time. And then so I've got my team at the office and we sit down, well, actually once a month, and we go over things, and then we start, if there's something that I've developed that we think we can put into the line right away. So it's really actually kind of frustrating for me, and I feel like if I was a smaller company, I could just be like, oh, I'm going to make this thing now. And instead, I'm kind of, so
It's just as bad.
yeah, my creative process is just very, in a way, obsessive and repetitive, where I will just, I have a jacket that there's 8 sketches right now, and I just have to make the damn jacket, so I can stop drawing it. So yeah, that's it. Just, yeah, like a hamster on that's it.
I write down a long list of different characters that I want to, costumes I want to make, things like that. From childhood into, now that I really want to make. And from there, it's, whatever inspires me in that moment, either a movie just comes out, a video game, anything like that, a comic I'm reading at the time, that I feel inspired at that moment to pull from that list and say, okay, I'm going to make this thing. And then from there, it's generally just, pulling different kinds of reference material, or just Google different kinds of, art styles and things like that to just kind of get an idea of what I'm looking for. And then from there, I like to kind of like make my own version or variation of a character. So then from there I go on and, design something that I want to do, or if I'm going to collaborate, with someone like, Katie or, Castle Corsetry, things like that. Pieces or a whole thing, or if I'm going to do it all on my own, then just kind of go from there and work on that. I think also deadlines are a big deal for me. Yeah.
Yeah, as a small business, like, it's almost worse because like I have a bunch of ideas, but I only have limited money, and also I have limited customers. So if I release a dress collection with 10 dresses at let's say $150 a piece, I'm gonna get nothing but cries like, I can't buy them all. I'm like, I know, I gotta do it slowly, so you can at least be like, get a few more paychecks in. Like, I can't bankrupt my customers, that would bankrupt me. So I have to work slowly, but I've learned over time how to cut back. I was initially doing collections of like 8 to 10 pieces, and I'm like, oh no, you guys, I don't have Hot Topic prices, so you can't afford all these all at once. So I have to cool it a bit. But I start generally with some sketches. I have a physical sketchbook with built-in fashion croquis, so they're like lightly silhouetted, and so I just draw on top of that. It's hard because I don't like fashion croquis, so they're not the shape of most human beings. So I like fatten them up a bit. I'm like, there's some hips.
Why are the legs so long?
They're so long. They're like 10 heads tall. 10 heads tall. It's really just weird to me. But I use that along with Tombow markers, which are really great markers that are like really, like they're like a marker on one side and like a brush on the other. So I can like fill it in, they're water-based, they can blend really well. I don't have an art background like at all from drawing, so I just kind of make it up as I go, and it works. And then I have an iPad Pro that I bought recently, and I'm now madly in love with, because I now have Adobe Photoshop on there for free, and I feel like there's a catch of some sort, but apparently there's no catch. And I just now sketch everything on there, and it's just so easy and quick, and I can do it on the go, and I love it. So I do into those two, and then I also sometimes do Illustrator for fashion flats, for like official things. But most of my factories can understand what I'm talking about, because I normally also pass them a sewing sample, because I'll then go to my sewing room and be like, I want to make this, I want to see how it looks, I want to finesse the lines, I want to figure out how I like it, I want to live stream while I do so, make sure that my customers like it, because a lot of the time I get feedback from them that they're like, I wish it was a little bit longer, oh, I wish I had this kind of sleeve. I'm like, that's a really good idea, I want to do that. So I work a lot with talking to my customers to figure out what they like too. But mostly they like what I like, so that's fine.
I get asked this question a lot, and it's hard because I don't have a specific like creative process. Like I kind of touched on earlier, that it's really driven by kind of what's happening within the community that we're making designs and stuff for. But yeah, like as for like technically creative things, I'll be like, hey, like, well, you know what no one has done anything before? Oliver and Company. Let's do something for that. And and then I'll crudely Photoshop something and then pass it along to my boyfriend and be like, can you do this in Illustrator? Like, make it a regular piece. So there's a lot of like, I will kind of come up with like a basic idea, then we'll go back and forth and back and forth. But it's really driven a lot by something that I feel like there's something missing for it kind of in the marketplace currently, and we listen to you guys a lot. If you're a fan of Whosits and you leave the comments and you send us messages, like we pay attention to that. So a lot of stuff is also kind of driven by you guys as well.
So for my sister and I, what we do, and we actually have written several books on this now, and we teach, we have a panel on Sunday where we teach more about how we create our novels and kind of all about that, is that we create, well, we go through and we do a lot. Like I have, does anyone here like Pinterest, like, or Instagram or anything? Like, I guess Instagram's kind of given, where I go and I integrate myself with pictures and inspiration from history and science, and then kind of mix it all together in my mind. And then create an 8-word or less summary of an ending to a story. Then we'll visualize individually, or some, just for the crowd right now, I'll just talk about myself. I'll close my eyes and individually think about it for 1 minute and create a detailed scene, and then reverse the story from that detailed scene and build the story from there. So that's kind of how our creative process goes, but we're always building in new and interesting directions, but for the sake of time, I will not get into that right now. What I'm thinking about, since we have, I'm just going to say, let's put, last 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Bang, lightning round.
All right. Q&A sound good? Let's do a Q&A. Anyone have questions? I think there's a wonderful mic right there.
What would you say would be the pros and cons of social media engagement and how it affects the growth of your business?
Entirely.
Everything.
My company literally only exists because of the social media presence online, and that is 100% how my company got off the ground whatsoever, is Instagram engagement. It is so important and crucial, especially in 2018, because everyone is glued to their phone all the time. So it's a really big focus of ours to figure out how to kind of harness that and use it to the best of our advantage to get the better engagement, to get those customers always engaged with the stuff that we're releasing.
Samesies.
I think everyone here may unanimously agree that social media is everything.
The only time it's not is if you're starting a business that is solely wholesale. And it still helps to have social media to create that drive from wherever, if you're going selling to Walmart, to have someone go into Walmart, go to Macy's, buy it, help us sell it. But if you're direct to consumer, you have to be on social media and you have to have a strong presence on it. Otherwise, you're going to lose everyone because, everyone's on their phone.
Thank you so much for your question.
Follow-up question. What has been, for all of you, the most effective social media platform?
Instagram.
However, they did change their algorithm recently, and it's a pain, but
Yeah, but
they
now offer click to buy for if you have over 20,000 followers, I think. And if you have a Facebook store attached to it, which I use Shopify, so it's all linked. So now if I post something, I can tag one of my items in it, and you can tap the picture, tap to buy it, it takes you to the site. It's so quick and easy now. So by adding that back in, the algorithm change, but if you can learn to change with it, you can still make money and monetize it.
All right.
Have you ever battled imposter syndrome? And how did you gain the confidence to where you are today?
Can I answer this?
Yes, I will not get in your way. Go forth and answer.
I want to do a TED Talk on that because I do think that most people suffer from it to some extent. There's a great book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and he calls it upper limiting yourself, where you have your self-image, and your self-image actually, it stops at a certain level. And I came from my family, when my dad did his taxes and we came in above the poverty line, we went out for ice cream. In fact, anyone in the lounge, when they heard me say ice cream for everyone, that's my dad's phrase. And so, coming from a core background, when I started to become successful and suddenly I don't know, I could walk into, I remember it's like 2003, I could walk into Coach and I felt like, I don't belong here, what am I doing here, they're gonna know. And it took me years to struggle with that, and I realized that most people do. And like, it's when reality starts to compete with your own self-image and you go, I'm not as good as this. And you know, I don't know, my only advice would be get that book and read it. The Big Leap, Kay Hendricks, I'll say it again. And it's really practice. You know, I used to have a flying phobia, and the way I got over it was get really drunk before getting on the plane and just fly. And that's the way I got over it. It's just you know, and to me, imposter complex, I don't know someone who doesn't have it to some extent, and you really just have to go, it's your negative self-talk, it's a negative self-image, and you need to fight against that. You have to be self-aware and fight against it.
Yeah, when I saw customers approach me like, oh my god, are you Elhoffer Design? I just like freeze up, so like, what? You want to talk to me? Like, it's, so like, I have to like, I'm trying to say, cool, yeah, I am, but like, inside I'm just like.
Your mantra for everyone is, you're worthy, period. You know?
For me, my mantra is, you are who you pretend to be, because who you pretend to be, let me rephrase that. If you are your actions, and you pretend to be someone amazing, you are that person because that's who you are all the time. Does that make sense? It's a fairly new mantra. Work with me on it, but it's working. Anyways, thank you so much for your question. I just wanted to give everyone a chance to kind of sell their social media handles so everyone knows where to find you or your booths. And let's start with Tiffany and then work away over here.
Sure, we're in Hall C, right under the 1800 banner. It's 1827, and we have a lot of con-exclusive prices, a lot of con-exclusive products, and it's just Whosits Whatsits across the board. If you know anything about Little Mermaids, I know you'll remember.
I'm Elhoffer Design across the board on social media and on the website, and it's my name right here. I named myself after my company after myself because that's my level of ego. And I am booth 475. It's the Hall A all the way to the end and then all the way to the back. So you have to really hike to get to me, but I have really awesome prices. So I just like hit you in the face. I'm a jerk.
I'm Ivy Doomkitty, all social media, ivydoomkitty.com, and I am signing at the Pinup Girl Clothing booth 1811 right after the panel, and tomorrow and Sunday as well.
Pinup Girl Clothing, booth 1811. And our social media, Instagram, Pinup Girl Clothing. Vero, I know that, you know, everyone's camped on there but not using it. Use it, I love it. Pinup Girl Clothing. And on Facebook, we have a Facebook page, but all the actions in our Pinup Girl Clothing customer lounge. Search it on Facebook. We have a lot of fun in there. Would you guys agree?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. And then I am Winner Twins 901. Right at the entrance, you walk in and you see me and our co-author Todd McCaffrey of the Dragon Riders at Pern. And my twin is going to be showing up any minute. She hasn't been feeling too hot, so I'd see her now. So thank you all so much for coming, and thank you all so much for being on this wonderful panel. I, for one, am very inspired.